Explosions, both natural and man-made, have punctuated human history with moments of extraordinary devastation and transformation. From volcanic eruptions that have reshaped landscapes and altered global climates to industrial accidents that have underscored the fragility of modern technology, these events have left indelible marks on the world. Chernobyl explosion. The Chernobyl explosion, one of the most catastrophic nuclear disasters in history, occurred on April 26, 1986, at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant near the city of Pripyat in northern Ukraine, which was then part of the Soviet Union. The explosion took place during a late-night safety test on Reactor 4. This released a massive amount of radioactive material into the atmosphere, which spread over much of Europe. The immediate aftermath of the explosion was chaotic and devastating. 2 plant workers died on the night of the explosion, and 28 emergency workers and plant operators succumbed to acute radiation syndrome within weeks. The long-term effects were far-reaching, with significant increases in thyroid cancer and other radiation-related illnesses among those exposed to the fallout. The Soviet government's initial response was marked by secrecy and misinformation, exacerbating the public health crisis. It took 36 hours before the evacuation of Pripyat's 49,000 residents began, by which time many had already been exposed to high levels of radiation. Eventually, a 30-kilometer exclusion zone was established, displacing more than 100,000 people from their homes. The Trinity nuclear test. The Trinity nuclear test, conducted on July 16, 1945, in the New Mexico desert, marked a pivotal moment in history as the world's first detonation of a nuclear weapon. This test was a key component of the Manhattan Project, the secret U.S. initiative during World War II aimed at developing atomic bombs. Led by renowned physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, the project brought together some of the greatest scientific minds of the era, working under immense pressure to harness the power of nuclear fission. The explosion unleashed an unprecedented release of energy, equivalent to approximately 20 kilotons of TNT. The resulting fireball and mushroom cloud were visible from over 200 miles away, and the blast generated a shockwave that shattered windows more than 100 miles from the test site. The intense heat vaporized the tower and turned the desert sand into a glass-like substance known as trinitite. The success of the Trinity test had profound and far-reaching consequences. Just weeks later, atomic bombs were dropped on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, leading to Japan's surrender and the end of World War II. The Plum Bob. The Plum Bob series of nuclear tests, conducted by the United States between May 28 and October 7, 1957, at the Nevada test site, represents one of the most extensive and complex series of nuclear tests ever undertaken. Named Operation Plum Bob, this series included 29 nuclear detonations, making it a critical period in the history of nuclear weapons development and testing. One of the most notable detonations in the series was Smokey, a test conducted on August 31, 1957. This test involved a 44-kiloton device detonated from a tower, producing a significant amount of fallout that led to extensive radiological studies. Another significant test was Rainier, conducted on September 19, 1957. This was the first fully contained underground nuclear test, an important milestone in reducing atmospheric fallout and advancing the techniques for underground nuclear testing. The success of Rainier demonstrated the feasibility of conducting nuclear tests without the significant release of radioactive materials into the atmosphere, paving the way for future underground testing protocols. Operation Plum Bob also included experiments that examined the effects of nuclear explosions on various structures, materials, and biological organisms. For instance, the John test involved the use of a nuclear-tipped air-to-air missile, exploring the potential for nuclear weapons and missile defense. Additionally, biomedical experiments were conducted using pigs and mice to study radiation effects on living organisms, providing crucial data for understanding the health implications of nuclear fallout. Bikini Atomic Bomb Test. In November 1945, just a few months after atomic bombs were dropped on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of World War II, U.S. military leaders began planning additional nuclear weapons tests. The first location that they picked to stage a blast was a remote place that probably few Americans even knew existed. Bikini Atoll, a tiny ring of small coral islands with a total landmass of only about 2 square miles, was part of the larger Marshall Islands chain in the central Pacific Ocean. In Test Baker on July 25, 1946, the U.S. military tried exploding a bomb 90 feet beneath the water surface of the lagoon. It was the first underwater test of a nuclear weapon and resulted in all sorts of startling phenomena. The blast generated a massive bubble of hot gas that simultaneously expanded downward and upward. At the bottom, it carved a 30-foot deep, 2,000-foot wide crater in the surface of the sea floor. On the surface, it burst through like a geyser and created an enormous dome of water that eventually reached more than a mile in height. The blast triggered a tsunami with a 94-foot high wave, so powerful that it lifted up the Arkansas, a 27,000-ton ship. Ivy Mike. On November 1, 1952, the U.S. detonated the first hydrogen bomb, resulting in the first successful full-scale thermonuclear weapon explosion. Operation Ivy was conducted on the Eniwetok Atoll in the Marshall Islands. It involved two test bombs, one, Mike, a fusion device, and the other, a stockpile fission device. An experimental hydrogen bomb weighing an immense 82 tons, Mike was not a deliverable weapon, but it was noteworthy as the first nuclear bomb to get a significant portion of its explosive energy from fusion, or the joining of atoms, instead of only from fission, the splitting of atoms. Mike was detonated from a control ship 30 meters away. The detonation resulted in a massive explosion, equivalent to 10.4 megatons of TNT. In a cover story after the test was confirmed to the public, Time described its effects. The force and horror of atomic weapons had entered a new dimension. The fireball reached about 3.25 meters in diameter. Elyadlab, the island on which Mike's detonation took place, was indeed vaporized, leaving a crater 6,300 feet in diameter and 160 feet deep. The mushroom cloud was 100 meters wide at its greatest extent. At that point in 1952, it was the largest nuclear explosion ever. Operation Castle. Operation Castle was a series of high-yield nuclear tests conducted by the United States in the spring of 1954 at the Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands. The most famous and significant test of Operation Castle was Castle Bravo, conducted on March 1, 1954. Designed to be a 5-megaton device, Bravo unexpectedly yielded 15 megatons, making it the most powerful nuclear device ever detonated by the United States. The test's massive yield resulted from an unforeseen reaction involving lithium, which greatly enhanced the explosion. The Bravo test created a fireball visible from 250 miles away, and the resulting mushroom cloud reached a height of 130,000 feet. The explosion vaporized part of the atoll and left a crater over a mile wide. Castle Bravo produced an immense amount of radioactive fallout, far beyond initial predictions. The fallout spread over a vast area, contaminating nearby atolls and resulting in significant radiation exposure for the inhabitants of Rongelap and Utrik atolls, as well as the crew of a Japanese fishing boat, the Lucky Dragon No. 5. Operation Castle was considered by government officials to be a success as it proved the feasibility of deployable dry fuel designs for thermonuclear weapons. Piper Alpha. Piper Alpha was an oil platform located in the North Sea about 120 miles, 190 kilometers, northeast of Aberdeen, Scotland. It was operated by Occidental Petroleum Limited and began production in December 1976, initially as an oil-only platform, but later converted to add gas production. Piper Alpha exploded and collapsed under the effect of sustained gas jet fires in the night between the 6th and the 7th of July 1988, killing 165 of the men on board, 30 of whose bodies were never recovered, as well as a further 2 rescuers. 61 workers escaped and survived. The total insured loss was about £1.7 billion, £6 billion in 2023, making it one of the costliest man-made catastrophes ever. Eruption of Mount St. Helens. The 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens was one of the most significant and catastrophic volcanic events in U.S. history. Located in Washington state, Mount St. Helens erupted on May 18, 1980, following 2 months of intense seismic activity and steam venting episodes. The eruption began with a massive landslide, the largest in recorded history, which removed the northern flank of the mountain. This was followed by a powerful lateral blast that sent a column of ash and gas 80,000 feet into the atmosphere, spreading ash across 11 states. The blast devastated an area of 230 square miles, flattening forests and destroying infrastructure. The eruption resulted in 57 deaths, most of which were due to asphyxiation, burns, and trauma from the blast. It caused over $1 billion in damages, impacting homes, bridges, and highways. The Wahoo took place on May 16, 1958. The detonation point was the open ocean near Inuiatak Atoll in the Marshall Islands. It was detonated at a depth of 500 feet in 3,200 feet of water. The detonation created a massive underwater shockwave and a characteristic water plume, often referred to as a base surge. The explosion resulted in significant displacement of water, forming a large column that rose high into the atmosphere before collapsing back into the ocean, creating turbulent waves and a large cavity in the water. One of the primary observations was the formation of a Wilson cloud, a visible condensation cloud caused by the rapid compression and decompression of the atmosphere around the explosion site. The Wahoo test, along with other underwater detonations, contributed to a deeper understanding of the potential impacts of nuclear weapons on naval warfare. Tsar Bomba. The Tsar Bomba, detonated by the Soviet Union on October 30, 1961, remains the most powerful nuclear weapon ever tested. Officially named in 602, it was colloquially known as the Tsar Bomba or King of Bombs. The Tsar Bomba had an estimated yield of 50 megatons, which is equivalent to 50 million tons of TNT. Initially designed to yield 100 megatons, the final version was scaled down to limit the radioactive fallout. The bomb was a three-stage hydrogen bomb, involving a fission primary stage, a fusion secondary stage, and an additional fusion stage to amplify the explosion. The bomb was dropped from a specially modified Tu-95 bomber and detonated at an altitude of approximately 13,000 feet, 4,000 meters, above ground to maximize its destructive radius and minimize fallout. The men on the aircraft also had 50% of survival carrying the bomb. The resulting explosion created a fireball that was visible from over 600 miles away, and the mushroom cloud reached a height of around 210,000 feet, penetrating the stratosphere. The shockwave from the explosion circled the globe 3 times, and buildings hundreds of miles from the detonation site experienced significant damage, including shattered windows and collapsed structures. The heat from the explosion could have caused third-degree burns at distances up to 62 miles, 100 kilometers, from ground zero. Little Boy. Little Boy was the codename for the atomic bomb dropped on the Japanese city of Hiroshima by the United States on August 6, 1945. This event marked the first use of a nuclear weapon in warfare and significantly contributed to the end of World War II. The bomb was carried by the B-29 bomber Enola Gay, piloted by Colonel Paul Tibbets. At 8:15 a.m. local time, Little Boy was dropped over Hiroshima and detonated at an altitude of about 1,900 feet, 580 meters, to maximize its destructive impact. The explosion created an intense fireball, generating temperatures of up to 7,200 degrees Fahrenheit, 4,000 degrees Celsius, and producing a blast wave that leveled nearly everything within a 1-mile radius. The explosion instantly killed an estimated 70,000 to 80,000 people, with the death toll rising to around 140,000 by the end of 1945 due to radiation sickness, burns, and other injuries. The blast obliterated approximately 4.7 square miles, 12 square kilometers, of the city, destroying homes, businesses, and infrastructure. The survivors, known as Hibakusha, faced long-term health effects, including increased rates of cancer and chronic disease due to radiation exposure. The psychological and social impacts were profound, with many survivors dealing with lasting trauma and stigmatization. Fat Man. Fat Man was the codename for the atomic bomb dropped on the Japanese city of Nagasaki by the United States on August 9, 1945, just 3 days after the bombing of Hiroshima with Little Boy. The deployment of Fat Man played a crucial role in Japan's decision to surrender, bringing an end to World War II. Fat Man had an estimated yield of about 21 kilotons of TNT, making it significantly more powerful than Little Boy. The bomb was carried by the B-29 bomber Boxcar, piloted by Major Charles Sweeney. Fat Man was dropped and detonated at an altitude of approximately 1,650 feet. An estimated 40,000 to 75,000 people were killed instantly, with total deaths reaching about 80,000 by the end of 1945 due to injuries and radiation exposure. The San Pablito market eruption. The San Pablito market eruption refers to the catastrophic explosion that occurred on December 20, 2005, at a fireworks market in San Pablito, a town in the municipality of Tultepec, state of Mexico. The explosion happened in the early afternoon, starting with a fire that quickly spread through the market, which was densely packed with fireworks and other flammable materials. The initial blast was followed by a series of subsequent explosions, causing a chain reaction that led to multiple fireballs and the destruction of a significant portion of the market. The explosion resulted in the deaths of at least 42 people, with many more injured. The intense heat and flying debris from the fireworks made the scene extremely hazardous for both the victims and the emergency responders. In the aftermath of the explosion, the Mexican government faced criticism over regulatory lapses and safety standards related to fireworks markets. The Beirut explosion wedding incident. The Beirut explosion wedding incident refers to the tragic event that occurred on August 4, 2020, when a massive explosion devastated the port area of Beirut, Lebanon. The explosion, caused by the detonation of approximately 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate that had been improperly stored in a warehouse, resulted in widespread destruction and loss of life. The explosion was one of the largest non-nuclear blasts in history, producing a shockwave that was felt as far away as Cyprus. It resulted in the deaths of at least 200 people, injured over 7,000, and displaced around 300,000 individuals. In the aftermath of the explosion, it was revealed that just moments before the blast, a wedding party was taking place in a nearby building. The explosion's shockwave and debris severely affected the wedding venue and surrounding areas. The tragedy deeply impacted the wedding guests, many of whom were injured or killed. Chinese warehouse explosion. The Chinese warehouse explosion at the Ruihai International Logistics Facility in Tianjin occurred on August 12, 2015. It was one of the most devastating industrial accidents in recent history, with significant impacts on the city of Tianjin and surrounding areas. The explosion originated at a warehouse operated by Ruihai International Logistics, a company specializing in the storage and distribution of hazardous chemicals. The initial blast was followed by a series of secondary explosions, resulting in a massive fireball that was visible from miles away and a shockwave that damaged buildings and infrastructure in a large radius. The explosion resulted in at least 173 deaths, with many more injured. Approximately 17,000 homes were damaged or destroyed, and thousands of residents were displaced. The facility lacked adequate safety measures and was operating without the necessary permits for handling such high-risk materials. The investigation into the incident uncovered widespread issues of regulatory neglect, corruption, and safety violations. Thanks for watching. I will see you on the next video.